Welcome to the GAMERamble video review for Zool Redimensioned, narrated by me, Darkcloud. As always, the full text version of this review can be found on the GAMERamble website linked below. The TLDR is that Zool returns after almost 3 decades in limbo in a reimagined version of his Mega Drive outing. This retro platformer boasts a few improvements compared to the original, including more accessibility options, a zoomed out view and level select, but remains true to its roots. Zool Redimensioned also includes an emulated version of the Mega Drive game as a bonus and more challenging Ultimate Ninja mode. Despite these, it's still a short-lived experience that will primarily appeal to fans of the original. Gameplay receives a 7 out of 10. The game is short but offers a nice slice of retro-style platforming entertainment. Graphics receives a 7 out of 10. The new zoomed out view is great, but the levels still look very cluttered at times, making it hard to spot hazards. Sound receives an 8 out of 10. The audio remains true to the original game with plenty of catchy tunes. The overall score for Zool Redimensioned is 7.3 out of 10. And now for the full review. The 90s were the heyday of the platforming genre, and many characters that have since gone on to become household names were born or refined during this time. Unfortunately, for every Mario and Sonic, there was a slew of anthropomorphic seals, bats and bobcats that failed to steal their limelight. One of these characters is Zool, a ninja of the nth dimension, who tried to go head-to-head with the 16-bit heavyweights, but faded into obscurity after one sequel. Zool Redimensioned brings the ninja out of retirement for a reimagined version of his original adventure. According to the comic strip found in the original instruction manual for Zool, which is sadly not included in this version, Zool got caught in a powerful vortex while on a routine recon mission in his spaceship. After crash landing in a world consisting entirely of sweets, Zool is informed that to return home he must liberate 7 worlds from the grasp of the evil Cruel and his minions. What follows is a fast-paced platforming adventure where Zool must run, jump and shoot his way through 7 colourful worlds guarded by a weird assortment of enemies. While Zool didn't impact consoles much, the Amiga version attained somewhat of a cult status amongst fans. Unfortunately, Redimensioned is based on the Mega Drive version, which was not quite as critically acclaimed. Although not quite a remaster of the original, Redimensioned takes the game and spruces it up enough to make it palatable to modern audiences without alienating fans of the original. The goal is still to traverse levels themed around sweets, music, fruits, tools, toys and more, while dispatching enemies like jelly, flying symbols, toffee apples and teddy bears. The 7 worlds are divided into 4 levels, each with a boss waiting at the end. One of the things that made the original game quite challenging was the zoomed-in view, which often resulted in getting hit by enemies before even seeing them. Redimensioned addresses this issue with a new zoomed-out view that gives players a better look at their surroundings. For those who find this too easy, selecting a widescreen version of the 1992 view or a midpoint between the two extremes is possible. Unlike typical platformers which require players to run from left to right, the levels in Zool are more maze-like. Most levels also have vertical elements to traverse, but thanks to the zoomed out view, it's now much easier to see where to go. The game's overall difficulty is also much lower, but players can choose between 2 different modes. Newcomers can opt for the Redimensioned mode, which adds a double jump to Zool's arsenal and removes the requirement to gather a certain amount of collectibles before the exit for each level becomes accessible. In contrast, the Ultimate Ninja mode is a little more faithful to the original, removes the double jump and reinstates the collectible requirements for a more challenging experience. Visually, Zool looks decent, but levels can sometimes be a little too colourful. The themes for each area is quite varied, but not very cohesive, and the graphics can sometimes be pretty cluttered. Even with a zoomed out view, it's sometimes hard to spot hazards like spikes before blundering into them. Enabling the CRT filter makes for a more authentic experience, but it can also make it harder to spot smaller enemies and traps. However, one of the visual elements that most fans of the original will immediately spot is the lack of chopper chops. These speeds used to be plastered all over the game's first area, but sadly they're no longer present due to licensing issues. Players interested in seeing just how far Zool has come in the decade since its original release can check out the emulated version of the Mega Drive game included in the package. However, purists will likely be disappointed that it's not the superior Amiga version. The Zool soundtrack is decent and adds to the game's old-school charm. Players can independently adjust the music and sound effects volumes and toggle between stereo and mono mode. Since it's a platforming game, we prefer a controller, but Zool also plays well with a keyboard. In addition to running and jumping, Zool can shoot at enemies, jump on their heads, and perform a spin attack or slide. The original game was notorious for how fast it was and how slippery the controls felt, and this is still true for the Redimensioned version. The inclusion of a double jump makes things a lot easier, and the game is also quite generous with its checkpoints. Losing a life returns players to the last checkpoint, while losing all their lives means restarting from the stage's beginning. The levels are all very short though, so it never becomes tedious. Something sure to annoy some players is the knockback effect if Zool gets hit, which is quite severe. The ensuing invincibility period is also relatively short, so it's possible to get hit repeatedly depending on how many enemies and hazards are nearby. Zool does have more bars of health than in the original game, and there's plenty of power-ups, like shields, bombs that can kill all enemies on screen, and even the Shadow Zool to double your firepower. Accessibility options include invincibility, infinite jumps, and auto-fire, but enabling any of these will turn off the Steam achievements. This is perfect for players who simply want to complete the game, while still giving more experienced players a challenge to work towards. The inclusion of a level select screen also makes it more convenient to go back and find all the secrets and collectibles. This means that while the game is short, it is replayable, and there are even a few multiplayer minigames like Zool's Gold, Rule of Zool, and Ball Brawl. Finally, there's a Beastopedia with entries for every single enemy in the game. Zool Redimensioned is a pure platformer, which means it will feel a little bare bones to modern players used to roguelike, Metroidvania or puzzle platformers. Fans of the original will enjoy seeing the return of the Ninja Gremlin, but they would most certainly have preferred including the Amiga version and not the Mega Drive. The game was short enough for us to complete in one sitting, but addictive enough that we returned for some of the achievements. Better and longer platformers are available for players who have no nostalgic attachment to Zool, but fans of the little guy should definitely check it out. Thanks for joining me for the Zool Redimensioned PC review. Remember to like, subscribe and share. Until next time.